Hello and welcome to Crusader Chronicles' first tutorial video. Today we're going to be talking about succession in Crusader Kings 3. Dealing with succession mechanics and laws, particularly Confederate Partition, which we typically find ourselves starting the game with that law. So let's jump into a game here and get started. Okay, so here we are in Ghana here. This is actually my current roleplay campaign. I'll put a link at the top with the playlist if you'd like to check that story out. But I actually found myself trying to avoid a succession crisis of my own. This is my king here, Akoi. He's getting older, he's in his 40s, and he has a very large realm here and many children, many sons and a few daughters here. So I figured if I'm going to avoid the realm splitting up, I might as well film my steps, and hopefully it will help someone else in the same situation. So I think I'll start out explaining what succession is, what that means. We're not talking about the HBO show. We're talking about the game concept here. So we have our current character, Akoi, and when our current character passes away, they will be succeeded by their player heir, which is the person that we continue playing the game as. And so succession is really kind of like inheritance. Who are we going to continue playing the game as when our current character dies? And then also for all of our other kids that are not the player heir, will they receive any land? And if so, what land will they receive? So then, how do I change my player heir? So the common answer would be up here under this green crown. I'm actually going to start in a different area though, which is down here in the culture area. This candle here in the bottom left. So if we click that, we want to go over here to the Innovations tab. And so what this area is reflecting, I believe, is the different ideas that were unique to different cultures or regions of the world throughout history. You have different military units, different military tactics, different legal structures all over the world and throughout different time periods. So the reason why I say that succession kind of starts here is because the game treats it as you can't really pass a law until you've come up with that idea or you've learned that idea. So in terms of succession ideas, those are here under the civic heading. And you also have the different eras as well that you need to sort of advance through learning these different ideas before you can move through them. But right now I'm in the early medieval period. And so under civic here, the first one is hereditary rule, which right away you can see allows me to enact the partition law, which is a succession law. And then there's another one here, royal prerogative, which lets me increase my crown authority, which is another step in changing your succession law. And then as well, if we get to the late medieval period, we have the one that a lot of people like, which is primogeniture, which is another succession law, which means that your eldest child will inherit everything. So you need to research the idea of the succession law you want before you can implement it. And who can research these ideas? The culture head can do that, and that is the ruler with the largest total number of same culture counties within their realm. So right now for Seninke, which is my culture. That's me. If it wasn't me, I would kind of be at the mercy of the AI in deciding what they research. Um, and right now, my first two characters were primarily military focused, so I haven't gone into the civic area yet, which could be to my detriment, but I am role playing. It's a role play campaign, so that's how it shook out. So let's pretend that I had researched a civic innovation here. Let's pretend I had researched hereditary rule, which means I should have access to the partition succession law. So where would you go to change that? And that is where we now want to go to our green crown here, and it opens up automatically on the domain tab, which just lists out all your holdings. But we want to go over here to succession. And there's a bunch of different information here. I can explain a little bit more later, but in terms of actively changing to the partition law here, it falls under succession. But right now we have Confederate Partition, but we can press change. And if we do that, we get a bunch more succession options that come up. And what do you know? One of them is partition, which should be unlocked from this innovation. And the reason I'm showing this right now is I just want to show that there is another step, I guess, beyond the innovation. And so let's pretend we were going to change the law to partition. It is blocking me for a number of reasons. One of them, the last option, is because I don't have the hereditary rule innovation yet. And actually the first one is because I do not have limited crown authority. So that is actually what I consider to be the second step in terms of changing your succession law. The first step being the innovation itself, the second step being having the authority to change the law, and then the final third step is actually changing it. So it is kind of a three-step process. And then in terms of the crown authority itself, I was actually on level 2 when I started recording. I just changed it to level 1 to illustrate the need to consider crown authority. But if we were to go to level 2, it's going to cost us some prestige. And right there you can see that it's going to give me access to the available partition laws. So I needed both. I needed the innovation and the authority in order to change partition laws here. And then if I wanted to go further into level 3, again, we're tying back into the innovation first. I needed to have the royal prerogative innovation. Yeah, so it really does flow from innovation to authority to the actual law itself. So continuing to the highest level of crown authority here as well, you can see that it gives me the option to designate my heir. And you can see that down here as well, designated heir, which of course is grayed out because we're not at absolute crown authority. So this is basically saying that I am so powerful, my power is absolute, that I don't even need any laws anymore. I can just designate my heir myself. So yeah, you can definitely see the flow. If we go here to get to absolute crown authority, we need royal prerogative innovation as well. So definitely we start from the innovation area over to the authority side, and then we can adjust our laws or just straight up ignore them at this point. So it probably seems a bit much, having to jump through all these hoops to change your succession. I just want to be clear that I'm just using this as an example of how succession works. I just wanted to explain, like where the laws even come from. This is not your only option for dealing with succession. So Nobody get overwhelmed. We'll keep going about the different options that you have in the rest of this video. But in terms of, you start the game fresh. I mean, this is only my second character, so it's a pretty fresh game. I didn't have any civic innovations researched. I initially was sitting at level 1 of Crown Authority. You're going to be starting the game at Confederate Partition, and the way you would sort of advance through these different succession types would be in following this path. But I just wanted to explain, like, where does Confederate Partition come from and the rest of these, and it's because you haven't researched any innovations yet and you haven't increased your Crown Authority. And just something else to note for Confederate Partition, if you're a tribal ruler, you're going to be locked to the succession type until you feudalize, which has its own hoops to jump through. So, yeah, if you're starting as a tribal ruler, probably best to get familiar with Confederate Partition and find some other ways around it, because getting out into these other succession laws will take probably even longer to get feudalized first. There are some additional succession options that you might see depending on your culture. I know there's if you play the tutorial in Ireland, let's look over there. If you play in Ireland here and you form the Kingdom of Ireland, I know definitely you get the option to switch to Tanistry succession, which is like an elective form of succession based on like ancient Gaelic practices. So that's an option in Ireland. I believe that Anglo-Saxons have something similar, the Witten, which is again a form of elective succession. And different areas as well, like I think the Holy Roman Empire, if you were to form that, there's obviously an election for the empire. I believe it's Bohemia that has the seniority option that's unique to them. So there's different succession options. I think the Byzantines start with primogeniture enabled. That's all I can kind of think of off the top of my head, but yeah, different regions and cultures have different starting stats, I guess, for succession and what decisions you can take depending on, if you form kingdoms or empires or what have you. So you can definitely play around with those or check out the wiki for Crusader Kings 3, and those should be listed out there. But I don't believe there's anything like that for us specifically in Ghana. So now let's talk a little bit about Confederate Partition, since as I explained, we're kind of going to be working with the succession law in terms of Akoi and his children. We're not going to be able to research any more innovations or increase our crown authority, within Akoi's lifetime. So we need to work within the succession law that we have and use the options that we have. So under Confederate Partition, this is sort of the little summary here. So your titles are going to be divided equally amongst your children. New titles may be created for younger realm heirs. So it kind of goes into more detail here that your player heir will always be given your primary title, your realm capital, and any de jure titles associated with it. And then younger children will be given titles starting with those of the same rank as your primary title, and then if there's none available, it starts going to the next lower ranking titles. So I'm definitely someone that would read this text and still kind of struggle to understand what this actually means. So let's walk it through with each of our sons. So we know that the titles are going to be divided equally my player heir should be getting my primary title, my realm capital, and any of the direct de jure titles that go underneath it. So, okay, let's take a look at that then. Just close this and go over to domain here. So, my highest title is a kingdom. I'm the king of Ghana. And then I do have some duchies here as well, which is the next highest title that I have. And then within those duchies, I have some counties. So it's kind of like a flowchart with like kingdom at the top and then duchy underneath, and underneath that is county. So my player heir should be getting my highest title, my kingdom, and then he's supposed to be getting my realm capital and associated de jure titles. So my realm capital is in Acre, which is within the Duchy of Wagadu. So from how I read the text, my player heir would be getting my kingdom, this duchy here, Wagadu, and the counties that go within that duchy. That's kind of how I read it. But in practice, it actually is working a little bit differently. But just keep in mind the flowchart of like kingdom, duchy, county. So we look at my sons here. So my first son is getting a kingdom, a duchy, and some counties. We know that. So my next son, it wants to give him the exact same thing. It wants to give him a kingdom to start. But I don't have another kingdom to give away. I only have one kingdom. So it's going to look to the next highest title and try to give him one of those. So it wants to give him a duchy, which I do have. I have this duchy here, the Duchy of Mema. So it's going to give him this duchy and the associated counties that I hold inside of it, which is Kuga and Mema. So he's pretty similar to his elder brother now, just he doesn't get to be a king. And then my third son, it wants to do the same thing. I don't have a kingdom to give him. I actually don't have any more duchies to give him. So it's going to start to want to give him counties, which is the lowest level on our little totem pole there. So the part that I don't really understand, if we mouse over my third son here, it's giving him Masson, the county of Masson, which if we go there, is part of my capital duchy of Wagadu. So I don't really understand why it's starting to break up my capital duchy into counties when it technically said over here that my player heir is going to get my realm capital and any de jure titles associated with it. And we can see that Masson is de jure hierarchy part of Wagadu. So that's the part that I've never really understood. The game does tend to start breaking up your capital duchy into counties if it runs out of land to give your other sons. Whereas I would expect it to give away, Kuga first before it starts giving away titles in my capital there. But yeah, I have many hours in the game, and that still perplexes me. But in theory, I guess it is going with that ranking of kingdom, duchy, county. But we ran out of kingdoms, we ran out of duchies, so it's starting to give away the counties that I hold to my younger sons. So this son is going to get a county, Masson. My next son is going to get a county, Walata. And then after that, even though I still have one more son there, he just gets nothing because there's nothing more to give him. And again, I would expect that he would get Kuga, since that seems to be a free county, but it looks like the game gave that to my second son. So perhaps I just don't understand how it's getting split, but somehow my second son gets 2 counties, and this kid gets nothing. So the issue with partition that we've kind of shown is that if you get to the point where you've got so many sons that they're starting to take individual counties away from you, particularly in your capital duchy, it really erodes your power base and makes your heir quite weak. So, I've got 2 duchies, 5 counties right now. I've got lots of gold coming in. I've got lots of men. And then my heir, as it stands right now, is going to drop down to a single county and have, his little brothers right at the gates here, coming for him. So it opens the door to, succession crisis, factions, and revolt, and things like that, because we all know the vassals will sniff out any weakness. So we're trying to keep our heir having a strong power base, which at a minimum would mean holding on to our complete capital duchy, and if we're really lucky, even holding on to Mama over here. So that is really the crux of this video. How are we going to do that, and what options do we have to avoid splitting up our capital here? So in terms of our options for dealing with Confederate Partition, I like to separate them out based on our traits here. There's pretty much one option for every color. We already talked a little bit about the learning option, which is probably the hardest option to choose, but that would be um, researching the innovations here, increasing our crown authority, and ultimately either changing the succession law or designating our heir. The next option I think of as being like kind of the diplomacy option because it relates to your family and your wives, would be to essentially do a bit of family planning as much as one could do in the Middle Ages. But as you can see here, like I have the option for concubines. I have had numerous concubines throughout my reign, which definitely gave me more children than if I just had a single wife. So some people prefer to restrict their fertility, I guess, by not having any concubines, not having more than one wife if their religion allows that. Um, you can also choose an older wife. My wife is pretty much the same age as me, and we got married young at 16, so you could choose someone that's older than you, or maybe wait to get married until you're older, and that will just restrict the amount of children that you're likely to have. You can also choose to become celibate. I believe that is under the learning skill tree here. Restraint. Yes, there we go. You take the decision to embrace celibacy. So obviously, if you're celibate, that's going to heavily restrict your fertility as well. So I'm going to skip over the military option here because that's the one that I'm sort of going to choose. The next one I think of as being like domain management, I guess. So maybe it goes along with stewardship. It would be to either restrict the number of counties you have. Maybe you don't expand your realm and, as they say, play tall. So I could have just stayed in Wagadu here and, held my capital, and that would go to my heir, and I have nothing else to give him. You can also maybe give away most of your land so that you only have, a single county, because then your player heir will have whatever single piece of land you own. This option is what I will call our intrigue options here. This is for characters that probably aren't going to win Parent of the Year here. So we do have the option to simply disinherit our children, but this is going to cost us prestige and renown. So depending how much renown you have or how early in the game it is, this might not be a great option. But we can right click, Under hostile, go to more, and the Disinherit option is there. And we do also need to be the dynasty head, so that's kind of important. And if we do this, our son here will be removed from the line of succession. Click that here, we can see how much prestige and renown it will cost. So for me right now, I could only do this about twice before I run out of renown. Another option that we have is to literally murder our own children, which is really, really quite terrible there, but we do need to be sadistic in order for that to happen. So here's one of my sons here. He is sadistic, and as we can see, we can use hostile schemes against our own children, which includes murder. And then the second last option, I guess, other than military, which we'll talk about, would be just to not intervene in succession. Just you know, see how it plays out. Have as many kids as you want, and die, and you know, let the chips fall where they may. And the last option, which is the one that I'm going to go with, which I consider sort of the conquering option, and I am, you know, militarily inclined here, would be to work within the structure of Confederate Partition and just hold enough land that I have enough for all my kids. So I don't want to have more than one kingdom because I want everybody to be under my main heir. But if I hold enough duchies for all of my sons, then they'll each get a duchy, and we won't have to start splitting up individual counties here. So that is ultimately the path that I'm going to take because I think, sorry, I keep clicking buttons there, I think that I can achieve that based on, you know, what I have around me. I have some weaker realms around me. I think I can gobble those up and have enough land to give my sons. Now, the only thing with choosing to expand and having Confederate Partition that you want to watch out for is, if we check this out here, there is a caveat here that new titles may be created for younger heirs. So I'm going to actually load another save here and show you what I mean. Here we fast forwarded quite a bit here. Akoi is now elderly, but you can see that my realm has expanded quite a lot. I've gone down the path of trying to get a duchy each for all of my sons, which mostly worked out. This was my youngest son earlier in the video, but I also ended up having 2 more sons after that time. So yeah, I've still got my work cut out for me there, but made a good attempt so far. But in terms of the dangers of expanding so widely with Confederate Partition, if we go up here, you can see that it says titles can be created. So I believe this duchy of Bambuk I'm actually going to give this son here, so we'll ignore that for now, but I've got 2 kingdoms that I can actually create. I have enough land to create those kingdoms. And even if I never click these buttons, and I never touch them, and I never create those kingdoms under Confederate Partition, they will be created on my death. Those kingdoms will be created upon my death just because I can. Even if I don't manually do so, they will be created on my death. So let's load a save again and show the aftermath of that. So here's poor Bayou here. After the death of Akoi, Bayou actually became a leper in the interim there, but you can see my realm is also not looking so good. Sorry about that. we basically split up here. We split into the Kingdom of Mali. There's one of our brothers, and the Kingdom of Jene, which is our other brother. Basically, even though I did not create those kingdoms as a coin, they were created for me upon my death, just because I had the conditions met, and I am using Confederate Partition. So what I probably should have done, going the expansion route, was making sure that as I expanded, I never grabbed enough land in any single kingdom, causing it to be created on my death. So if we look here, for example, at Mali there, you can see I'm already quite close. I only need 2 more counties to create that kingdom. So I probably shouldn't have expanded anymore. I should not have grabbed those other 2 counties. Similar with Jene, I only needed 1 more county there, so I should have left that alone and not expanded there, because doing that, I met the conditions and then the kingdom was created on my death. I probably should have expanded more in this direction, for example, where I have no counties. Then I could have taken still, quite a bit of land, 6 or maybe like 5 counties rather, before meeting the conditions, which would have secured land for my sons without creating these kingdoms. Something else to consider if you're going to use the expansion strategy and getting land for each of your sons is you may want to wait and pair that strategy up with changing your succession law to the next level of partition here, which is just regular partition as opposed to Confederate partition. You see right now we're on Confederate, and we have this sentence, this white sentence here: new titles may be created for younger realm heirs. But if we switch to regular partition, that sentence goes away. So we don't have that issue of kingdoms being created when we meet the conditions, if we are using just regular partition. And it's a little bit easier to switch to regular partition than it is to go, all the way to a single realm heir. If we look at the requirements, I know for sure one of them is having crown authority at level 2, which we already have, and the only other requirements are obviously that we have the support of our vassals, but this one here is to have the hereditary rule innovation, which is actually found in the early medieval era. So it's going to be much easier to grab this innovation here, which is in our current era, than it would be to grab like primogeniture in the late medieval era, which is pretty far ahead in the future. So this is still definitely not an easy thing to do, as we talked about before. You can see that hereditary rule is going to take me like 300 years, close to 300 years to research. So it's still going to be a couple generations of rulers to get to that point. But you may just want to keep that in mind when you're planning, and maybe hold off on any aggressive expansion until you can reach that stage of switching to partition. Hopefully that was a good summary of our options in dealing with Confederate partition. We kind of have an option for every color of trait or skill here. So we have family planning, like deciding who we marry or how many concubines we take or whether we're going to be celibate or not. We had our conquering option, where we can conquer enough land so each son gets an equal share, but we have to be careful not to expand too far and start meeting the kingdom requirements, because when we die, those will get split up, unless we were to go to the regular partition option first. And then we talked about, domain management. maybe playing tall and limiting the amount of titles that you hold directly, or giving away most of your titles. We talked about sort of intrigue, or maybe less savory options such as disinheriting or even murdering your own children. We talked about how to change succession laws and how that kind of requires a three-step process of, researching and innovation, increasing your crown authority, and then finally getting the chance to change the law or designate the heir here. And then, of course, the final option would be just to do none of those things and just let nature take its course, I guess. The only other thing I want to mention before we finish this video would be gender rules and how those relate to succession. So we can find that under our green crown again, and just under our succession law, we have our gender laws. So right now I'm using male preference, which, as you can see, means men will take precedence over women in succession. It also allows me to have concubines. So in this case, my daughters are not in the line of succession since I do have many sons. You can definitely change that and include your daughters, or even, make a matrimonial society where your daughters will inherit over your sons. You can click here, click change, and then we have the different options here. Male only, which is where women just absolutely cannot inherit. Male preference, where like men take preference. So if I had no sons, it's possible that my daughters could inherit. And we have equal, where all of your children have an equal place in succession. Female preference, which is sort of the inverse of male preference here. It means that if I had no daughters, my sons would inherit. But as long as I have daughters, they will be the main heirs. And then female only, which is the inverse of male only, which means my sons cannot inherit at all. I must have daughters. So where you start in terms of these options is dependent on your culture. I know there are a few cultures that start with the equal law here. I believe the Basque in Spain start as equal. There might also be some African tribes here, and some Eastern cultures as well. So it kind of depends where you start out. You can definitely check the Crusader Kings wiki to take a look at those. And in terms of actually changing it, you can just sort of try to change it and hover over and see what is required. I know that before the Royal Court patch, most of the gender laws were based around religion. Since if we go to our religious view here, we have this doctrine, male dominated. So that was sort of the main driver before the new expansion and patch. But now you can see that last option there also includes the option to have a cultural tradition allowing equal inheritance. So that pretty much covers everything I know about succession in Crusader Kings 3. I hope this was helpful to you in terms of managing your own succession. Certainly, if it was helpful, please like and subscribe, and we'll definitely continue and create some more tutorial videos in the future. So keep an eye out for those. Yeah, in the meantime, check out our roleplay our playlist with the Adventures of Akoi here and the Tonkera Dynasty. And yeah, see you next time.